So I'm joined today by a man who needs little introduction. Many listeners and viewers will be aware of him. It's former Metropolitan police officer Jon Wedger. Welcome, Jon.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Mark. It's a pleasure.
We've been talking about doing a show for quite some time, so we probably should have done this sooner, but we got there in the end.
Yeah.
I'd like to home in on whatever you've got on the music industry. So you touched on the P. Diddy allegations there, and that's causing a lot of people to go, well, the music industry and entertainment is totally corrupt. Yes, I've been saying that for the past 15 years. And it's not just in the United States. This stuff goes on in Britain. It's institutionalized. You touched on Elm Guest House there. One of the names that comes up in connection with that is Cliff Richard,
Yeah,
who had allegedly attended that place. He was known as Kitty when he signed the guest list, and all sorts of stuff went on there. There's the Walton Hop back in the day, which was
yeah.
this discotheque in Walton on Thames. Jonathan King used to run that with Chris Denning, who were both later exposed as paedophiles. And there were young lads who were sexually abused there, allegedly. Jimmy Percy from Sham 69 was one of the attendees of that. Tam Patton, the manager of the Bay City Rollers, was involved. There's the story of Adam Ant. I don't know if you've come across him,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, his father, Stuart Goddard, went to jail for paedophile offences. And also, there's what you first presented to me when we spoke many years ago, this curious video by Culture Club. It
Mm.
was their first hit, Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? And you told me to take a look at the video, a close look at the captions that appear on screen. So you got Boy George in three different timelines. And first off, it's 1936 in the Gargoyle Club in Soho. But in the second segment, he emerges out of a swimming pool, and the caption that comes on the screen is Dolphin Square, Pimlico. And that is the place where allegedly many parliamentary paedophiles resided. There's a story of a young lad that was apparently discovered running naked down the street in a state of distress. And when he was stopped by police, he said he was trying to get away from Leon Britton, who was Margaret Thatcher's Home Secretary. So, what have you got on the sordid nature of the British music industry that
Yeah.
ties into everything you've just said?
I mean, I worked with guys that had been on big inquiries. So these inquiries had always gone on, but they'd always been covered up. Now there was one in that was in Cricklewood in London where there was celebrities going in and they were defecating on glass tables while someone was underneath masturbating. One of my colleagues told me about that. This place would
Not
be.
my idea of a party, but maybe I'm old fashioned.
Well, I want to go on about that, because we heard this, didn't we? What happens at a Diddy party stays at a Diddy party. Well, what does that mean? Um, now, Cliff Richard, of course, he's quite a litigious man, isn't he? So he will try and sue anyone who says anything against him. So we've got to be very, very careful. But what I would say about Cliff Richard is, has he got any convictions under the name of Harry Webb? And I think if someone was to look on the police national computer, they might just find that, right? And that's as much as I'm going to say. Okay. I've heard of a woman actress who's classed as a national treasure. Can't name her because I can't prove it in court, but I've seen the the conviction on the police national computer. I spent some time with the Force Intelligence Bureau, which used to be based in southwest London, and a guy showed me there's a special unit in the police called that were part of the fraud squad, but they used to be termed the celebrity squad, and they were very, very select, hand-picked people, quite straight-laced individuals. But anything to do with celebrities, this unit would take it. So it wouldn't go out into the main, mix of detectives. It go to so the police is very compartmentalized. So they would get this, and whenever you get to talk to an officer, that have been in these units throughout the 80s and 90s, you will get quite a lot of disclosure coming through. There's one guy, and I've gone on about him many times. Again, I can't name him, and he's everyone again national treasure. He's probably one of the most popular male comedy actors that there is, but he's a paedophile. He's a paedophile. Now, again, I can't name him, but it won't take much
Well,
working
I
out.
think I know who you mean, and it seemed a few days ago as if this was going to break surface and go mainstream, but
Yeah,
it seems to have fizzled out or been covered up.
yeah, yeah. He was with two accomplices, and uh, two young boys were taken to his flat apartment or whatever it was, house, and were abused over a period of days. And my mate said to it, two guys went and got convicted. And my mate told me, he said the kids kept saying it's the actor who did the worst things, the actor, and he never ever got touched. And again, then we see him everywhere. Again, you look at Boy George, the family O'Dowd. Now, the strange thing is, I ended up having becoming a partner and having children with his cousin. So I sort of basically not married into, but I ended up being part of that family. I've got two O'Dowd children. I've got four children, but two of them are O'Dowds, and so and I know that part of the world, and I know the family. And if you look at them, there's three boys in that family. There's George, Jared, and I can't remember the other one, but the other two both went away for murder. So there's a lot of dysfunctionality. They're sort of half gypsy family anyway. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to be like that, but what I'm saying is that yeah, they come from a tough family. They're from a tough part of the world, with a tough background. So something definitely goes on. And I know for the girl that I was caught up in, she was a victim of childhood abuse as well. So there was a lot of abuse within that whole family.
Hmm. Well,
And you're
George
right.
was done in New York for chaining a rent boy to a radiator and ended
Yeah.
up doing time for that.
And the same happened in Bethnal Green. He was caught doing the same thing over here. He was investigated for that. And you can see the dysfunctionality, and again, all this about selling their souls and stuff like that. We see that quite a lot, selling their soul to the devil, and then the partying goes on. So you've got that whole mix of it. There was a woman who wrote a book called Dancing with the Devil, and she approached me, and we had quite a few conversations, and it was all about her life as a street prostitute. And then she gets approached by some wealthy white guys, businessmen, who said to her, "Well, you haven't got to take heroin um, and go on the street and buy it. We'll give it to you. You don't have to do prostitution, but we want you to help us." And so she agreed, and they gave her some free heroin, but she had to attend an address in Virginia Water in Surrey. And she went down there, and it was an old church. And when she went in there, they sacrificed a baby, cut it, slit his throat, and made her drink the blood. And it was a satanic ritual. And she said, there were well-known people within that party. She actually went to the police and told them, but they did absolutely nothing. The case I was involved with, in which young children from the age of 9 to 14 were being pimped out, there was a judge involved. There was a, a police officer involved, middle ranked police officer. And there was a member of the BBC music department was involved. He never got prosecuted, so I can't name him. But he was quite regularly ringing up our main defendant, which was a woman, ringing her up in prison because we were monitoring the phone calls and sort of trying to work out how they can all get away with it. Um, I heard many things in my career, uh, but it was only really when the Elm Guest House thing came out, right, that you started really getting official clarity, because a lot of it would be covered up. It would be so badly covered up, and when the first responders would turn up at a place, so things like Paula Yates, when she overdosed, and all of a sudden there'll be these special interest groups would turn up from the police and everything else, and they would take over. Now, I'm going to give you an example. There was uh, this is very strange how this worked out. There was an MP that was found hanging with an orange in his mouth, bloke called Stephen Milligan, many years ago with women's underwear on. So he was wearing a full women's underwear with a orange in his mouth. And a call had gone in to the police. Now, I think officially he was found in a flat, but I heard he was actually found in his parliamentary office and his body had been moved. Right. So And it turns out it's a rent boy. He's with a rent boy, and there's this sex game that goes wrong, and the orange has been put in his mouth, and he's had some sort of asphyxia, and he's died. And the rent boy's panicked and he's ran, but out of decency, he's called the emergency services, and they've attended. Right. Anyway, the first officer in the scene was my old sergeant. So he turns up and he said, of course, there's this guy there, clearly dead. And they get him down, and the pathologist has to come, the doctor has to come and declare life extinct. And he said, as that's happening, these guys turn up in suits, and they're from military intelligence, get their badges out, and they said, right, we'll take over from now. And he turned around, he's a stoic old school man. He went, no, you can F off. It's got nothing to do with you lot. This is a police investigation. Now F off. And he said, had they taken over, it would have never been disclosed. Now, the weird quirk of fate in this was that I get contacted by a lady, and I go out and I meet with her in Spain. And she made lingerie, right, at a very high level. And she was based in the north of the country. And she said, we get a call one day, and it was from a woman, very posh woman. And she says, I've got two clients that are going to come up to be measured up, right? And she said, we need to be assured complete discretion on both of them. And she said, of course, she said, we're used to like wealthy people and well-known people coming up for measurements. So, but what we were surprised about, that they came up to measure for women underwear, and it was Leon Britton and Stephen Milligan, right? And they got measured up. So now I know who made the underwear for Stephen Milligan. And this woman said, the guy who was found dead made his underwear. He was actually a very nice guy, a little bit shy. You can see he was quite a broken man. So, but the other one was vile. He was disgusting. He was horrible. And I put all this in my statement to the government inquiry, and they didn't bother following it up. And that was Leon Britton. And she said he was vile, and she measured up for crotchless underwear. Now, there's a thing called the Solenki tapes, and it was an interception at customs at Dover, and there were photos found with Leon Britton wearing women's underwear with a young boy on his lap, a naked young boy on his lap. And a social worker went down and identified the boy as being a kid in his care. Now, I knew that social worker. I've spoken to him many, many times. And again, it was all covered up. But when we look at Leon Britton, he went on to become the UK's youngest ever appointed Home Secretary. He went on to Northern Ireland to become the Foreign Secretary over there. This man is in charge of our criminal justice system, right? He's in charge of it. Yet look at the allegations that were made against him. Many, many. When I was in the police, the name that always got mentioned to me by officers in the paedophile unit where I was seconded was him. I heard his name more than anyone else's name. Leon Britton, all the time. All roads led to Leon Britton. Yet nothing. And in fact, his wife went on to sue. Shame on you, Lady Britton. Shame on you. But then we got to look at other revelations that come out that people are totally sort of dismissed. I get it with the music industry because it can be a very debauched thing anyway, to go into. But when you look at the politicians, these are meant to be upstanding people that are the peacekeepers, the lawmakers, the adjudicators for our society, which is based on Christian values. Yet the perversion that's gone on amongst them is appalling, and the cover-ups. A politician can go to prison, right, for no less than a day less than a year, right, and still keep their job, no matter what the offence. If a police officer's brother gets arrested for shoplifting, that copper can lose his job. So it shows this total disparity. Now, with the Elm Guesthouse list, right, there were three politicians and people in the political realm. One was Cyril Smith, a very, very prolific paedophile. And again, covered up. He was stopped on the motorway in Northampton on the M1 with a car boot full of child porn and let go. What? Why? His name was also mentioned, linked to the murder of a girl in Yorkshire. A name will come to me shortly, and it was isn't so.
Well,
The
John,
name's
John,
called,
I think it's worth mentioning that so many of these names that you've called out are sirs or lords.
yeah,
Sir Cyril Smith, Sir Edward Heath,
yeah.
Lord Leon Britton. I think there's a trend emerging here. All these
Well,
people were knighted by the Queen.
well. The other thing is, right. We had a guy called Nicholas Fairbairn. Now, no one's heard of him. Why has no one ever heard of him? Nicholas Fairbairn was the advocate depute for Scotland. So he was the highest chief advocate barrister for Scotland. He was in charge of the Procurator Fiscal, the PF in Scotland. For those that don't know, the Procurator Fiscal is a CPS for Scotland, right? The main adjudicator on who gets charged. Nicholas Fairbairn was in charge of that. Now, when you become an advocate depute, right? It's a really weird. So it gets royal ascension. So when you get to that rank, if anyone kills you, they can stand trial for treason and be hung. So there's only a couple of offences where you can still be hung. I think it's arson in a naval dockyard, treason, and the murder or attempted murder of an advocate depute. Right? Nicholas Fairbairn was caught out with Cyril Smith and another. It might have been Leon Britt and another politician on the Elm Guesthouse list. And I know the guy who put the Elm Guesthouse list out, a guy called Chris Fay, a very, very brave man. Now, Nicholas Fairbairn, right, he was this eccentric Scottish laird, right? He was a lord, Lord Nicholas Fairbairn. He had well known for his liking of whiskey. He'd always wear a kilt, and they thought he was a quirky individual. Thatcher loved him, right? He was named by 15 out of 20 young girls at Fornethi Kids Home for raping them when they were young children. His partner in the legal world was Bob Henderson, and Bob Henderson was also, I think he was maybe found guilty or was alleged of incest on his own, rape of his own daughter and rape of other children. Fairbairn was also raping his colleague Bob Henderson's daughter. She's gone on to write a book about this. So when he interviewed in the Scottish Independent Sexual Abuse Inquiry, the girls' home for maladjusted and girls in need of respite care in Perth, they were taking kids out of the slums of Glasgow and putting them in this care home. And the women that were running it were pimping them out to posh men's parties, which Nicholas Fairbairn was running, and they were raping them. But wait 1 minute. Nicholas Fairbairn, throughout this, was having a long-standing affair with a woman. And that woman was Esther Ransom. Esther Ransom, who set up Childline. Now, when I was on the child abuse inquiry, Mark, right, we would deal with thousands of serious allegations of rape and attempted murder of children every single year. I was in the same office that dealt with Victoria Columbier, and I was one of the investigators of Baby P. I interviewed the mother. So I've been involved on the cold face of these big, high-profile child abuse inquiries, and these are people who do dangerous, serious, horrible things to their kids. Out of all the referrals that we got, and the referrals could come from the local police, from social services, from schools. We only ever got two from Childline. So where do they all go? Where do all these allegations go to from Childline? And Nicholas Fairbairn, a very, very active paedophile in charge of the justice system for Scotland. For many years they knew about him and did nothing. As bad as Savile, nothing done. So when we're going on about Jimmy Savile, man, he's not the only one. Now, there was someone that was mentioned to me.
Sir Jimmy Savile, another sir.
Yeah, Saint Jimmy Savile. Builds hospitals, saves kids' lives. And we look at Al Fayed. And shame on all these protection officers, ex-military, ex-police that work for Al Fayed, that would have seen young girls going into his office and coming out screaming, crying, and knowing damn well, and then been involved in a conspiracy of silence and threatening them. Shame on them, grown men. And again, protection officers for Leon Britton. We're going about Jonathan King and people like that. I remember a guy got in touch with me and he did some building work on King's house, and he was seeing young kids going in there, and he chucked a scaffold potlock at him and smashed the window of his car, and threatened him. You know, so they're horrible. And you're right with Chris Denning and the Walton Hop. Why did they even set these things up? These discos, targeting 12, 14-year-old kids, and knowing what they were doing.
Yeah. You don't get many names from the music scene that speak out, but one who's been quite vocal over the years is Brian Harvey, formerly of E17. And I know that you and he don't see eye to
No,
eye,
I don't like him.
which is a shame. Brian has obviously been through some stuff. He seems to be quite a broken man. And it's quite difficult to follow his claims because he goes off in all kinds of different directions and stuff. But yeah, I know the two of you don't see eye to eye, and he doesn't seem to like you.
Well, I don't like him, and I've done nothing against him, and it's up to him. So no comment on that man. And what you're saying is what has he actually said? What allegations he said? I can't make it out. What he said. What are his claims? I know they got a problem with their manager Tom Watkins or Watson or whatever it is.
Watkins, yeah.
Yeah. I've heard all that, but again, he rants. I find him a very, I don't know, very selfish sort of guy, and I've got no time for him. He's vexated and he's unreasonable, and I've got no comment on him. Don't even want to go down them lines. I don't do these things to get caught up in conflict with people.
No, I appreciate that. I just think it's a shame that everyone can't come together and be unified because we've all got stories to tell.
I don't care about that because I will speak and sit down with anyone. I do these podcasts. I've done them with ex-murderers, ex-gangsters who really have a gripe with the police. Some of them dangerous individuals, and I've never had any drama. So why would I put myself in the situation of someone who's clearly mentally unstable and highly unreasonable? What would be the benefit? There would be no benefit. So I'm not doing it, and I'm not putting myself through it. And I don't need that drama. I don't need it. And the guy's always getting arrested for stuff. He seems very mentally unstable. So there's no point. I will happily sit down with anyone and be reasonable to anyone. Happily do it. And I've done that. I've done interviews with drug addicts, former prostitutes, all sorts of the whole lot. Never had any drama. But he's unstable, and I just don't want to go there.
Okay, fair enough. There's a YouTuber by the name of Tisa Tells, and recently she's been making claims about Tim Westwood, the former BBC Radio 1 DJ, in connection with P. Diddy. And she's claiming that Westwood is part of Diddy's UK Connect. So, that they're affiliated with each other. Westwood has apparently been investigated by the Metropolitan Police and the BBC, two separate BBC investigations. So that'll go well then. Since April 2022, so 2.5 years, and precisely nothing has happened. He's still walking around a free man. He's still throwing parties in South London and Lagos, Nigeria. I just wonder if his name has come up in connection with any of your investigations.
Well, look who did his security? Who does his security? A guy called Vincent Rapp, right? Who's this Brixton gangster.
Used to be a guy called Freddie Daly. Did you ever come across him?
No. But I know that a guy called Vincent Rapp. And now there's a lot of talk about this fella sort of being a bit bizarre around young girls and things like that. They always seem to slip through. But the problem is you've got to get the full evidence, Now, when you look at abuse cases, only 2% attain a conviction. And that's 2% of what's reported. So many won't report it. All right. But in order to attain a conviction beyond all reasonable doubt, it's very, very difficult. Now, when you've got a victim who comes forward years later, right, and then they have a history of drug addiction and they have a history of mental health problems, they go into the category of bad character. So the defense will use that. Now, if someone has been taking drugs and then supporting that by shoplifting, right, they get convictions for theft, which is a crime of dishonesty. So they will be tarred straight away as being dishonest. And when you get that put against you, the only thing that draws a same parallel is dishonesty, is you're a liar. And of course, these people have gone through their lives being called a liar. If they've been in a kid's home, they've made an allegation in a care home about a teacher, they would have been beaten, they would have been whipped, and they would have just been raped and sodomized again. And it would have been put on the record, this kid makes up lies. And these old records can be used. And since 2003, the Bad Character Act brought in, they can go fishing for all this so-called bad character and use it against the victim. And especially when you get the young girls that are caught up in that sort of rap scene and the black music genre, and if they've come from a community that is a bit anti-police anyway, it's going to be very, very difficult because the trust isn't going to be there, so they won't go to the police. And then when you've got the security that is around Westwood, people like Vincent Ratt, who have then gone on to sort of intimidate them because they live in the same areas. It doesn't, it's all stacked against them. But, we've got to look at Tim Westwood. Look at the state of him. He's a weird looking man. Look at P. Diddy, a weird looking, ugly man. They need to boost themselves up in this false genre. If you just even listen, I don't even know why even the black community warmed to Tim Westwood, because even white people think he's a geek. So what are the black people doing around this guy? He's
He was
weird.
an appointed gatekeeper. He was inserted into the UK rap music scene to like keep a lid on things and steer it off in certain directions because he's from the white middle class establishment. He was put in there. I used to know him quite well and DJ'd alongside him and stuff. And yeah, you're right. A lot of people have had suspicions about him for many years in terms of how did he get so powerful. And in my view, it's because he was appointed as gatekeeper.
But these things we can never prove. You see, now when a list came out by an organisation called PI, right, Paedophile Information Exchange, it came out in the 70s, and it was a pro-paedophile group that was annexed to the Labour Party, and it was backed by three female politicians: Patricia Hewitt, Margaret Hodge, and Harriet Harman, right? Every one of those female politicians went on to be right honourables, every single one of them. Now, what I was doing was trying to get rid of the age of consent between a man and a boy and reduce it down to 8 years old. Harriet Harman herself was trying to push age of consent between a girl and a man to 14, right? They were behind this group. And when they got this list through, it managed to get disclosed, and the intelligence services jumped on board, right? And then they looked at it, and the people that were on there. So we had someone that was head very high up in the boys' brigade. There was one of the highest ranked army colonels, majors, whatever. He was on there. There was one guy that was in charge of children in poverty, a charity that dealt with children in poverty. One guy dealt with a charity that dealt with children in care placements. So they had every single connection of all these vulnerable people, right? But it gets protected. And they found out that Special Branch for 8 years had been funding PI, had been funding it. So the police's Special Branch with government money had been paying all expenses for PI. And their excuse when it went to the inquiry was that we wanted to know what they were doing. Well, one person that was Sir Peter Heyman. Right, Sir Peter Heyman had ended up getting convictions of some sort of child abuse nature. He was head of MI6. Right? Now, you sit there and think, well, MI6, why do they get involved? Now, there was a thing came out in the First World War called a D notice. And a D notice was to stop people discussing things of a military nature, right? So it said loose lips sink ships was a term that came out. But a D notice, what is it? People don't even know. It's a defense notice. It's a tool that can only be used by the military. Yet D notices get served. I had to sign the Official Secrets Act twice in order to get my pension. I had to sign it twice because they're of what I knew. Right now, we see D notices getting served when disclosures are coming out about the entertainment industry and about the political world. Because, like I said earlier, crime is a reserve of the lower and the working classes. So you don't see people like Prince Andrew going into a Witherspoons and having a fight or stealing from B&Q or something like that. But when it comes to paedophilia, well, his name is cropping up. Again, Tim Westwood, right? He doesn't really, I know he's been shot and all that because he thinks he's a hard man. He's dick. I really don't see the appeal of him. Some things I don't get. Some people you can understand it. But with him, I don't get it. I just don't get it. I'm thinking, what is it about him? And the other one is David Rodigan, isn't it? I look at him and thinking, well, what's going on with him? Why he's just some posh middle-aged Jewish guy who jumps about screaming? What's going on there?
Well, they're both middle class, posh white boys who went to public school, and one is the gatekeeper for the UK hip hop scene, and the other is the gatekeeper for the UK reggae scene, which are both black music genres.
But why is the black community warming to these people?
Yeah, that's my question too. I don't get it.
Their discernment would be better than that. It baffles me. But going back to what I'm saying is that when you've got sex offending against children, it goes across all stratas. And this is what brings them together. And this is the glue that they hold on there. And this is a conspiracy of silence. And this is why the D notices get served, right? Because it can politically destabilize a country. So the criteria for the military intelligence to take over from the police are simple. Anything that causes political instability, economic stability, or interference with food and water. All right. So if the terrorists are going to sort of blow up a water plant or something like that, it's that they'll get involved. Or something to do with someone poisoning our food, they will get involved. They will take over from the police. So we can put that to one side, the water and the food. We can put that to one side. But political instability, well, of course, I can remember in the police that if there was paperwork that an officer had that could cause some problems, shall we say, it got burnt. Right, back in the day when it was an analog system, right, anything that was contentious got burnt. Right, in the backyard, in a metal drum, what's termed a midnight barbecue, boom. So there'd be no trace. And I was told by one guy, especially burn the audio tapes, because if you throw them in a bin, they'll turn up on a landfill site. And if there's ever a search on a landfill site, that's why you got to burn it. That was what was said to me, right? So I said to one guy, the one who actually made up the guest house list, I said, if this stuff is so detrimental, why do the intelligence services not burn it like the police do? And because we see this all the time with records, when they want the old records, when, there was a fire, or there was a flood. Fire and floods is what the social services have. Their buildings always catch fire or they always flood. That's how it is. And he said, because it's got blackmail value. It's got blackmail value. And this is what Jimmy Savile was. He was a fixer. He was a Satanist. Let's not get this right. He was a Satanist. Now, there's a rank in Satanism called the fixer. And they will get children for parties because these people want to have sex with children. They're emotionally damaged. Now, there's a brilliant book called The Poisoned Bowl, and it's all about the public school system in the United Kingdom, the rich, elite, fee-paying schools. They divest the children from their mother at a very young age, right? That causes a lot of emotional damage. When we look at Nicholas Fairbairn, who I mentioned earlier, his mother actually rejected him. rejected him, right? What damage would that have done? He was put into a school called Loretta in Scotland, which is the equivalent of Eton. And under the Scottish Inquiry, Loretta, this posh all boys school, there were allegations that the young boys were put into a pit and urinated on, defecated on, whipped and electrocuted on the genitals. Now, what would that do to your mindset as you're growing up? Your mum doesn't want you, and then the fagging system. Now, there's a guy who's the son of Lord Montague of Bewley, right? Robert Montague. He writes a book about his father, this motor museum in Hampshire, Bewley, you know, Lord Montague. He's seen as an eccentric. However, he was raping his own son, and 9 members of Churchill's cabinet were also doing likewise. This young boy, gets sent to Eton. He gets sent to Eton, and he said the fagging system is nothing short of a rent boy racket. He reported the sexual abuse, the beatings, the canings, and the sodomy from older boys. Because this is what it does, it gets passed down, right? He was caned so hard by the Don of Eton that his buttocks were ripped open, right? And then he was placed under the pupillage of a Monsignor who raped him, right? So with all of that, abandonment from your mother, being placed in these schools at the age of 5, whipped and sodomized, what is it going to do to you? Now, when we look at some of the higher members of our cabinet, you know, in British politics, Cameron stuck his penis in a pig's mouth, Johnson and all that, all went to Eton, have all been through the same system. These are emotionally damaged. Like I said to you earlier about the emotional damage from abuse, they are emotionally damaged because they've been sexually abused and they've been bullied. Now, if we look at these Richard Curtis films, The Blackadder and these 4 Weddings and all that sort of rubbish, these very white, middle class, blah, blah, blah films, watch them and see the references to buggery that are made in there. They're off the scale. Taking one for the regiment, like a crumpet up the rear and all this. There's all these, you know, similes to being buggered. And the other interesting thing is that when you look at these Richard Curtis films, go through the credits at the end and Google these people. Google them. It's the most interesting thing you'll ever see. Most of the actors are the children of high-ranked military personnel, and some have gone on to kill themselves, and they've suffered from anorexia, self-harm, because it's sexual abuse. So when we see in these pop stars, celebrities, right, and they're drug addicted because they come from abuse, because they were abused. They don't want to see it. They want, but you know, all these boy bands. Oh my word! Come on, please, people, wake up, boy bands. It's perverse at the very least. You know, there was one program making of a boy band, and they got all these lads out to Ibiza. I can't remember what band it was, and they were stripped to their pants and diving off with their little young bodies into the sea. These grown men cheering them. If you was a dad and you saw someone doing that to your son, you'd go and break their jaw. You know, let's just see it for what it is. You know, it's paedophilia. They're showing you, and when they're doing all this eye thing and all that, that's occultic. Now, right? Let me tell you something. I speak to a lot of survivors of satanic abuse, and I've spoken to a lot of practitioners of Satanism. Right? I get, and you don't really hear much of me now. I keep myself very under the radar, you know. I got invited to a very clandestine meeting with a former Satanist, and we end up at this location down on the south coast. And this guy, he told me it all, walks and all, everything, right? And he said, everything's an inversion of Christianity, right? So when we're going about religions all being the same, it's total rubbish, right? Because we never hear the term anti-Buddha, anti-Allah, anti-Ganesh, anti-Hernaman. anti the universe, but we do hear the term antichrist, right? And satanic rituals are an inversion, an antithesis of Christianity, right? And the high dates on the satanic calendar are really the attack on the life of Christ, such as Easter and things like that. Now, they use the Bible a lot as well. And they use the book of Isaiah. And in the book of Isaiah, there's what's called the five I wills. And the devil proclaims, I will ascend above the clouds. I will be this, that, and the other. I will rise high. I will attain this. I will everything else. And the last one is, I will be like the Most High. He will be like God, like Jesus Christ, right? Because that's what he wants to compete to be. Now, in Satanism, that they venerate, worship, and they ritualize the I wills. And in Satanism, it's very time sensitive, and they strictly adhere to the dates and things like that time. So 13 is a very, very powerful number in Satanism. So that's a date of the first I will. Okay, so they'll get the victim. The victim will be born into pain. So usually they have a premature birth. At the birth, they insert things into the little baby's anus to cause pain, and they will just experience a lot of torment and a lot of incest and a lot of abuse. They get electrocuted. They get drowned underwater. They get locked in cupboards, traumatized, bestiality, all things like that. These poor kids go through, which creates the multiple personality. And then the first I will comes along, and they are taken to this ceremony, and basically it's where they're first really made. Some do it a bit earlier on, but to engage at their own free will in the sacrifice of a child. So children are used, and I've seen official statements. I had one sent to me by a prostitute, had made a statement, had gone to the police, how she would be paid £2,000 to get pregnant by a punter, a street prostitute, and they were told, don't go on the pill, don't no condoms, get pregnant, we'll pay you £2,000. And she would go to a clinic in West Brompton, give birth, and the baby would be taken. And she later found out that they were used for satanic rituals. So all these things are people going about babies being put in containers and brought over from foreign lands. No. It's all nonsense. They're used here. There's enough people that will provide their own children and their own babies. And babies are used because the sacrifice is a blood sacrifice, and there's no blood in hell. And it's an attack on the blood that Jesus Christ let for us all, you know? So it has to be blood because the power's in the blood, and the demons want the blood. So they have their first I will, where they are willing participants and instigators in this ritual, and where they will kill a child. Now, 13 years. So when's the next I will? They'll be 26, right? 26. Now, something happens to people as they grow up and they get independent. But when they're caught up in this, life starts to harrow them. If they've got a heart, they start realizing it's wrong. The pain that they put animals through, babies through, it's wrong. What they're doing is wrong because they're integrating into society. So they subdue that through drug addiction, through alcoholism, right? But because it is a spiritual thing, Satanism, and all this stuff we see, all in the music industry, right? There's a curse around it. So what will happen is, if they don't attend their second I will at the age of 26, the next year they're finished. They're dead. Now, why is that significant? How old is someone then after that second I will?
The 27 Club, isn't it?
There you go. There you go. And this guy told me that. He said, that's why you see Amy Winehouse, you see Jim Morrison. He said, it's all Satanism, John. It's all Satanism. And I've been told about even the Rains list. We've got to look at the Rains list. It's a document that's out there, RAINS, the Rains list. And it's a list compiled by a chief, one of the best psychotherapists and psychiatrists in the UK, a head psychotherapist for the Maudsley Hospital. And she would take patients that had extreme trauma on the DID. No one really knew about this thing. And she'd interview them. And she realised those that had the most intense trauma all had one thing in common. They were victims of Satanism. So she decided to make a list of all the people they name and the places. So to make it an official journalistic document, as long as 3 people independently named one person, she put it on the list. So there's an extended list of uncorroborated, then there's a corroborated journalistic list, right? Called the range list. You've got people like K.D. Lang on there, right? Elton John on there. They're on the range list. Michael Barrymore. There's loads of them on there. They're named. There's loads of rock stars. There's loads of people from the music industry. They're on the range list. And it is out there. And that's the secret of their success. And this is why they get so damaged. When I watched that documentary on Amy Winehouse, I took a real interest in Amy Winehouse because at the time I was working with street prostitutes and she looked like one of them. So I knew there was something major wrong in that woman's life because when they interview her, she's quite a kind woman, right? She's quite compassionate, right? And so I knew there was a conflict so monumental in her life that she was actually saying no to the life she was in. And then they always have a handler. And I think her father was a handler because he was always there. He's a bit like a Jerry McCann. He's always there, you know. And then they get her caught up with other drug addicts. So these rock stars never marry a plumber, do they? You know, they always marry another rock star.
That's one of my lines. No one's dad's a plumber.
Yeah, exactly. You know, what do? They don't ever go out of their demographics at all. They keep it in that club. And with this Diddy thing, this is what you'll probably see. And also, right, what happens on a Diddy party stays in a Diddy party. Now, let's break that down. Me and you, if we were to have this interview at your house or a studio nearby, and it went really well, and you say, all right, let's go and have a beer afterwards. So we go and have a beer, right? And then we go on to somewhere else. At what point would we have to have a meeting the next day and say, John, what happened last night? You know, at what point in you know, the downturn of that evening would we call it a day, or we'd need to conspire with each other, right? So maybe someone caught you sniffing a bit of cocaine if you're a bit of a public celebrity. That might cause a bit of damage, right? But really, does it really matter? I don't think so, right? If you're caught with another woman, does it really matter? Yeah, it's going to cause problems at home, but really, you'll get away with it, right? It's not something that's going to cause shock and horror. So years ago, you could bribe someone with the fact that they were having an affair. So post-war England, if someone else, a woman was with another man, she was a hussy, you know? How dare her, right? Sorry, a bit background noise, but apologise for that. But and if someone was a homosexual, again, it was illegal up until the 60s. You got prison for it. So you could bribe someone. You know, you could bribe someone. So isn't it funny that you know, this thing about Tony Blair? You know, his real name being Charles Anthony Linton Blair. And a guy called Charles Anthony Linton Blair was caught twice importuning men. As the case of a man called Harry Webb may well have the similar thing, right? May well. Right, Bow Street Magistrates Court tried Charles Anthony Linton Blair and fined him. Well, the moment Charles Anthony Linton Blair, aka Tony Blair, goes into Parliament and gets inaugurated as our Prime Minister, he shuts down Bow Street Magistrates Court straight away. Isn't that strange? But if I go back to what I'm saying, we can have these things go wrong, but we'll get over them, right? There is not a society on this planet, there is not a community on this planet that allows paedophilia. The age of consent may alter, and there'll be some religious doctrines that might allow for this, especially Islamic ones, okay, where it says that, you know, the Prophet married Aisha at the age of 6 and consummated at the age of 9. And we do see child marriages in the staunch Islamic world. But that aside, on the whole, every country has an age of consent and does not allow paedophilia. They even done studies with indigenous tribes. So they did a study in Papua New Guinea and they did a study in the Amazon basin. And on each occasion, they found that if anyone is caught sexually interfering with a child, they are banished to the jungle for a period of no less than 2 summers, 2 years, right? Because they know that no man alone can live for 2 years in the jungle. So really, they're sentencing them to death. So there is not one culture that allows it. I know the Labour Party tried, and Harriet Harman, and I think it was Patricia Hewitt. I think Tony Blair made her Minister for Children. Minister for Children. We've had 5 prime ministers consecutive who've had PAs, political assistants, have had convictions or allegations for paedophilia. The most famous one was Patrick Rock. I think it was Tony Blair's one. It was active. So we've seen that. Why do we constantly keep seeing it? So it will be children that will be the thing that what happens on the Diddy party stays in the Diddy party. And why does a man want sex with a child? Because they can't pleasure a woman. They're emotionally broken, right? And that's why. And that's why with Tim Westwood, he's a geek. He's a total and utter geek, Tim Westwood, right? He needs his celebrity status and he needs his wealth to try and attract young girls, underage girls, because it makes him feel a man, because he's a highly inadequate individual, right? You can see that. That's no secret. He's probably had difficulty growing up pulling a bird. He probably had extreme difficulty, and that's why he's invented himself and he's ingratiated himself. And of course, because he's the son of a vicar. Lemmy from Motorhead was a son of a vicar as well, you know, and things like that. So we do see these things, very geeky. But look at Lemmy with a big wart on his face and all that, you know. I'm not knocking anyone, but look at it for what it is. When I was investigating child sexual abuse, my detective inspector said to me, John, when you look at these paedophiles, they've all got one thing in common. They're all odd looking. They're all weird looking. And they were. When you really look at them, look at Gary Glitter. I mean, come on. He's just a no one. He's a weirdo. He's a geek. And I think they get compromised and then they're offered a deal. That's what I think happened. They're offered a deal. I used to recruit informants. My job was to go into the prison system, and my job was to get someone in trouble as an informant, right? And I used to do it with a lot of all serious organised crime. And it nearly cost me my life because I did it with the Turkish mafia, and it caused a lot of problems, you know. And there was a hit was put out on me and a contract to shoot me and all that. But I know how it works. I know how it works. Jimmy Savile, I believe, was an asset for the intelligence services. I think he was just very good at his job. He knew what people wanted. He knew the age of the children they wanted. He just knew everything. He could get them whatever they wanted. And that's why Jim will fix it. Jim will fix it, you know, and that's why he was allowed to get away with it. And back then, informants, part of the criteria was to take out the competition. So they would give us info on the competition, and they wouldn't get nicked. Or if they did, they'd get away with it because we would be doing deals with the courts. Right. So at the day of a trial, if one of our informants was on trial, we'd go with a letter. We'd go with a letter like this, hand it personally to the judge. He'd take it. He'd read it. It'd go like that. He'd take it out, he'd read it. And he'd say, okay. And then the guy, and I've seen it happen, a guy should have got 15 years, walks out with 2 years. You know, I know how the system works. I see it all the time on a police level. But we're looking now at political instability. Why? You've got to use common sense with this and look at it. If it looks like a dog, it wags its tail like a dog. It's a dog. P. Diddy's a dog. Look at him with big buck teeth and all that, you know. He's a freak. He's a weirdo. He is.
Nasty eyes, very soulless, lifeless eyes. That's why he wears dark glasses all the time.
Yeah, he's an inadequate man. Why is a need for all these sexual partners? Why can't one woman be enough? I might be preaching Christian values and all that, but why? It's like Mick Jagger said he's had 1,000 women. Well, he's obviously no good at shagging if he needs to go through 1,000 women, is he? If he was any
Right.
good, one woman would be enough, wouldn't it? You know,
Right.
it. And if you look at Mick Jagger, how effeminate does he look when he's on stage? Very effeminate. Look at Bon Jovi. Well, they look like women with tight jeans. It's you can see what they're putting out. It's a very effeminate message,
Hmm.
you know. And I think that there's a lot of sodomy goes on, a lot of male abuse, rapes. I think there's a lot of it goes on, and that's a conspiracy of silence, you know. Gangster rap. What you know? What have you ever met a tough guy? I've met tough men, hard men.
Yeah.
They don't walk around with big chinchilla coats on, you know, and and white tracksuits. What man wears white, you know? But you look at these all white. Real men get dirty. They do things. They fix things. You know. I knew a guy who chinned a cow. You know, he punched a cow. I never saw him punched up like Puff Daddy and making out they're tough. These aren't tough men. These are very twisted, very emotionally broken, effeminate men. And I'm just seeing of what they are. And you know, what will happen with the Puff Daddy? The same thing as the IICSA. If your viewers have no idea of the IICSA and no idea of Elm Guest House and Dolphin Square, they need to research it because they're giving up singers, right? Who we pretty much know are wrong uns anyway. They're doing all this rubbish. Dolphin Square was giving up political leaders, right, of a nation that still has control over a vast percentage of the globe, right? And links and one guy, it was Lenny Harper who investigated Haute de la Garenne. He said to me, "Be very, very careful, John, because what you're investigating goes right to the heart of the British establishment." At the sheer essence of this, like I said at the beginning, we are dealing with very, very emotionally broken people. What is needed is, and I question quite a few of these celebrity pop star singer, I don't know, whatever, that are going to Christianity. I question it. I question Russell Brand and his journey to Christianity. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm a born again Christian, and I'm not saying I'm this, but I've seen people change. I don't really get it with him. I don't get it with him. I'm not convinced with him. We see it with Kanye West again. I think it might be a preemptive strike. I think they know things are coming on top, and it could be used as strong mitigation when it all does come on top.
Well, Beyonce claims to be a Christian.
Yeah. Well, the devil's a liar. He speaks the language of lies, you know. So I'm very, very cautious of all these people. But what will happen is it will come out, right? There'll be something will happen, something will go kaboom, and it'll all be lost. The government will take ownership of it, and then the people get what the people want. We've done that inquiry, it's finished, move on. And it will all be pushed under. It will all be pushed under. You know, if you look at Jeffrey Epstein, what happened with him? It is no different to what happened with Fred West. Exactly the same. Fred West was a Poundland version of Jeffrey Epstein. Fred West was procuring children for sex parties and entertaining many, many people.
And he was a
And
weird looking guy as well.
of course, and what happened to Fred West? Hung in custody. Look what dead in custody. Look what happened to Jeffrey. It's exactly the same. Dead men tell no tales. So when people say is Epstein really dead, of course he's dead. He's dead. He's gone. He's not living on an island somewhere. They killed him. He didn't kill himself, but they killed him. Right. Fred West, I generally think he was done in as well. You know, I think something happened there. Bang, someone went in and just dealt with him. And it's exactly the same. The blueprint is the same. There's There's so many unsolved murders around Fred West. There's death all around him. And of course, so much never, ever, ever. Like I said, only 2%. Only 2%. If we look at all the missing people, we're only looking at 2%. You know, there's much, much more that goes on that never gets reported, never gets said. So
Mm.
I think what is needed is those that are involved to go to God, to speak out, and to tell the truth. Those security guards, if you're tough guys, then be a tough guy, be a real man, and speak out. Survivors of this need to speak out. Who's that? Justin Bieber. He needs to tell the truth.
Mhm.
Tell the truth. What went on? Tell the truth. I can always remember when I was on a special unit dealing with child abuse. There was a couple of us. We got trained in profiling. We was really privileged, and we worked with one of the best profilers that worked for the West. The Western world, the justice system there. And he only ever worked for the prosecution. And he turned around. It was the time when Michael Jackson was being exposed, and he just said, look at him. He's a paedophile." And he just went through the whole profile of Jackson. He went, "He is a paedophile, right? He's done it. He's done it." And that was that. And he explained exactly why, um, and it sort of made sense. You've got to put the fame thing aside and what they tell you, because how many times do you think when I've investigated a paedophile and asked them what they've done, they've gone, "Oh yeah, I've done that, and I've done many more." I'm going to tell you around zero. They're all liars. They're all manipulators. And the best thing they can do is have you in on it. Have you, in on it. And if anyone is at these parties and they say, "Look, I saw you sniffing cocaine," well, say, "Yeah." Do what George Michael did and stand up and say, "Yeah, yeah, all right, I am gay. I did have sex in the toilet with a bloke." Yeah, stand up and do it. So power to him, power to George Michael, really.
Mm.
I think he was quite a good guy.
Yeah, I do
Um,
too.
yeah, I think he was tormented as well, but I think what he did was good. He was brave, but the rest of them, and I think Amy Winehouse was brave as well. I think she was screaming out, telling us,
Mm.
"Help me, help me, help me," and they killed her. They done her in, and they get, it's it's a dirty game based on dirty things, and there'll be rules to it. And if you go out them rules,
Mm.
um, that's it. You're done. But I'd say don't be frightened of these people. Speak out. I did. I spoke out. It cost me a lot. I nearly lost everything. I nearly went to prison. I nearly lost my home. I nearly lost a child into a care system. The stakes were so, so high, so high. I've been a very, very broken man throughout this, but they had nothing on me. That's why I could stand tall and say, "Do you know what? F off. I don't care what lies you put against me. I will stand up against lies. That's all right. No problem. Stand up against lies. No problem at all."
Mm.
Because I never did it. Had I done it, they would have had a lever on me. They would have had to plea bargain with me, and I would have had to accept a plea bargain. I'd have had to, but they had nothing on me. So I told them, stick it up your ass. Do what you have to do, but you will not silence me. You send down an innocent man. Send an innocent man down. Do you think they go quietly? No, but how many of them do when they get sent down? Their heads go down off they go because they did it. But every now and then you will get that guy, that one case. I had one case at Wood Green Crown Court of a guy, and he was up for the attempted murder of a little baby, and he never did it. He never did it. And he told me he did it, but he was doing it to protect his missus. And I went up to the judge. I told the judge, he's not done it, I know he hasn't done it. And it was a horrific case. And he got found not guilty. And he moved on with his life. But they never ever went for his wife. And what happened was she was taken away from the child, but she was allowed a visit. And I put on the report, "Please do not let this woman alone with the child." And the social services said, "Well, there's no findings against her." I said, "I'm telling you now, she's dangerous." And she met with a social worker and a baby. The social worker wanted a cigarette. So she said, "Well, if you go out onto the patio and have a cigarette, I can have my baby and you can watch me from." So the social worker thought, "Well, that's reasonable." And so she hands the baby over to the mother. The social worker goes out, lights a cigarette. And as she lights it, the mother gets the baby by the feet, swings it round and smashes its head on the concrete of the floor, you know. And that's that, you know. And they was going to send down the husband for it, and he never did it, you know. And you could tell, you just know when someone's innocent, you know. But again, that they'll get these spin doctor lawyers will come in. They've got the right people, like the McCanns, you know. They say the right thing, but you know, you've just got to break it down. You've got to look at their lifestyle, and like I said, if it looks like a dog, smells like, and just look at these people. Some people are naturally beautiful, right? And they've got beautiful voices. Why do we always have the same people? You put on the radio, it's the same shit all the time. There's millions and millions of beautiful singers out there, guitar players, musicians, good, but they never make it. Why do we always hear the same ones all the time? All the time. You know, it don't make sense and it's not right. So just look at them for what they are, and they'll be telling you. They'll be telling. There's a guy I know. His name called John Ramirez. He's very well known in America. He's an ex-Satanist, and he's a born-again Christian. He's an evangelist. He's a preacher, and he calls out Marilyn Manson, and he says to him, Marilyn Manson, I know I'm a Christian. If I ever see you, I'm going to smash your face in, because he knows he's an abuser of children, and he calls him out for it openly. He's never been prosecuted, never. And he turned around to me. This guy, he's a Puerto Rican from the South Bronx, and he's a good guy. And he said, John, I grew up with Jennifer Lopez. I grew up with her. We're from the same community, same from the South Bronx. He said she went into Santeria. He said she's so heavily involved in Santeria. She's a witch in it. Santeria is Satanism. You know, it's voodoo for the Caribbean. And he said she is absolutely entrenched in Santeria. So she's
She was
linked to,
supposedly a girlfriend of Puff Daddy at one point.
yeah. So you know, it's all there. It's all there. There's no smoke without fire, none whatsoever. You know, and I'll just say it will go the same. There'll be loads of names come out, but really there won't be a massive shock, horror. You know, so what? I think the industry is a dirty industry anyway. They sell their souls. They're open to it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll leave it there, John. I feel like I need to go and take a shower after wallowing in all that sordid, dark material. And you do this every day. I don't know how you keep going, you know, dealing with all this depraved, dark information. But I commend you for it because, you know, you're doing a great service by getting this stuff out in the open. And obviously, you do have coping mechanisms for wallowing in this stuff.
Yeah, what I say, I always want to finish with this. I want to say to any victims and survivors of abuse that we've been mentioning, it's not your shame. Don't hold that shame. Hold your head up high. You never did it. They did it to you. You never had a choice, right? Don't let them destroy you. Speak out. Speak out. I know the police are a bit rubbish at the moment. Hopefully that'll change, but report them. I want to call out to all those that are associates or security or whatever for these perverts involved in this genre, this music genre. It's now time to speak out. All the bodyguards, all the security teams, it's now time to be real hard men and speak out, right? Don't be frightened. It's the victims that are frightened and not you, right? Stop taking the devil's dollar and speak out. And I want to call out to all those that are in the music industry, that are involved in the abuse, in the occult. Stop it. Stop it now. If you're involved in the occult, your master is a liar. His language is lies, and it will end in death and tears. Stay away from it. Go to God. He'll look after you. And if you're doing anything wrong, child abuse, if it was done to you, you know the pain. Stop it, because you're destroying souls. We've just seen this poor lad from, who's the one who's just killed himself in Argentina?
Oh, Liam Payne.
Liam Payne. We've just seen him tormented to the core, absolutely tormented. He's got a pain in him that he wants to get rid of. He's been taking drugs and alcohol. A young life lost. Why do we always see it in this industry? We don't see plasterers doing it, do we? Delivery, Amazon drivers doing it, but we always see it in this, because drugs such as heroin, they're an analgesic, they're a painkiller. And same as alcohol, It's just masking something. It's just a plaster over something big. And let's pray for his soul. Let's pray for that poor soul, and his family and everything else. Because where's it got him? It's got him nowhere. It's destroyed him. So let's wait and see what comes out of that. But I feel sorry for his family. It must be absolutely appalling. And I feel sorry for him. He must have been in total torment. And if all of that is a result of what's happened to him and what he may have been involved in, because let's look at it this way, sometimes that is something that causes people, they can't live with themselves because they know what they've done. That guilt and that shame because they know what they've done. But suicide isn't the answer. It really isn't the answer. So that's my message.
All right, Jon. Thanks for coming on today. Appreciate that.
No worries. God bless you.
All right.